Hi, in this video I'm going to give you an introduction to the terms utopia and dystopia. I'll look at some dystopian literature and generally talk about the functions that dystopian literature usually has. Let's start. First of all, let's give you a little overview on how I have structured this video. We'll start with the terms utopia and dystopia. Where do they come from? What do they mean? And we'll go into some common features that a utopia has or dystopia has. Then I'll turn more towards dystopia. There's usually technology involved. What kind of role does technology play here? I'll give you some examples of typical classical dystopian literature and some newer ones, but these can only be examples. It's a large genre. And what kind of functions does dystopian literature usually have in most cases, in most novels? Let's go. The terms first. So we have the word utopia, which comes from Greek words, and it can be translated into either no place or good place, and this ambiguity is there on purpose, so it's not clear if it is a place that cannot exist and doesn't exist, so no place, or if it's a really good place. But of course, in reality, it's used in a combination of both a good place that doesn't really exist but is perfect. So the dictionary definition is usually something like this: a place of ideal perfection, especially in laws, government and social conditions. So not a perfect place in the sense often that you have, for example, everything you want and every dream is fulfilled, but the structure is organized of your society. The structure is organized in a perfect way so that you can achieve most things. Sometimes the word is also used in political debates to discredit an opponent and say, well, the opposition is talking about what they're talking about, these plans, they're utopian. So meaning they cannot really come true. They sound great, but they cannot come true. But this is not the original meaning that we are using in this context of a society that is structured in a perfect way. Then, of course, we have the opposite, a dystopia. So dys is like dysfunctional, it's the opposite of functional. So dystopia is supposed to be the opposite of a utopia, so sort of an anti-utopia. So an imagined world, so not a real world, an imagined world or society in which people lead wretched, dehumanized, fearful lives. So where basically living there is not great at all for the individual. Why? We'll look into that in a second. What are common features of a utopia? In a utopia, we look first at our society today. We see some problems there: poverty, war, famine, etc. And in the utopia, these problems are resolved, so people have found good ways to deal with them. Individual needs, like needs for food, relationships, etc., they are all fulfilled, so people are not don't need to work hard to fulfill these goals, or it's possible for them to fulfill these needs. And there are no social conflicts at all, or if there are, they can easily be resolved. Dystopia, of course, is the opposite. So what does that mean? We take contemporary concerns, so problems we have in our society today, and they are not resolved in this dystopia, but they're exaggerated. So if we have a problem with privacy today, that our data is being collected by Facebook or whatever, then this idea, this problem is exaggerated in the dystopia and made much worse. The same goes for example, pollution. If we have problems with pollution today, a dystopia could imagine what does this pollution do in 30 years' time, etc. And the individual is not its needs are fulfilled, but quite the opposite. The individual is oppressed, so it cannot freely decide what it wants to do or what he or she wants to do. Often there's some technology involved, and this fear of technology usually plays a role in a dystopia as well. The society is not free, and quite the opposite. It's often very strict. There are very strict rules, and there's a regimentation of society. So it's, for example, divided very strictly into social classes that have a certain role to play, each of them. Often other basic fears also are exaggerated, so we all are afraid of certain things, and these fears are sort of multiplied, and it is imagined what could be behind these fears, what kind of things could happen there. Often, as I said, technology plays a role in the dystopia, and I would like to look at the role that technology plays more closely here. I'll give you some examples to go along with it. Technology can be a cause of problems in a dystopia. An example would be artificial intelligence. So the technology itself can cause problems. An example would be I, Robot. It's a movie, but it's also based on a short story where basically artificial intelligence tries to take over the world and control humans. So it's the cause of the problem. Or, and this is more often the case, I find technology is a tool that is used to create this dystopian society or to sustain it. So in 1984, for example, another classical utopian novel, in 1984, this whole society wouldn't work without screens, cameras, microphones, etc. So all this technology is necessary to have this kind of society. Or, and this is also often the case, technology was first supposed to solve problems, but later on ends up creating problems in itself. This idea is taken to the extreme, for example, in Unwind, where the transplantation of organs, donation of organs is taken to the extreme, where people are basically teenagers that misbehave are taken apart into little pieces and donated to other people. What are some other examples of dystopian literature? So which novels would you come across most? One of the traditional ones is Brave New Worlds, Fahrenheit by Ray Bradbury, 1984, The Hunger Games. It's a more recent one, more focused on young adults, as I said, not only for an older audience, but also for young people, quite exciting. And The Handmaid's Tale, Never Let Me Go, or Station 11 is also a more recent one. But there are many, many, so this genre is really huge. People really like to write and read dystopian literature, and I think the reasons are clear why dystopian literature is more successful. It can be sort of boring to read a book about a perfect society. In a dystopian society you always have a struggle, something is going wrong and people are trying to solve problems, so that often is much more exciting. But beyond that, I find that not only is it more exciting to read, but it also can teach us a number of things. And these are the functions of dystopian literature I want to talk about here. I think these are mainly three things. The first is to encourage individuals to question their own society, so that by looking at the society in the novel and seeing what's wrong with it, we take a closer look at our society and say, well, is this really better in our society? What is also going wrong in our society? How could we solve these problems? And it also serves as to show what could happen in a worst case scenario if some of the problems we have today and some of the trends are taken to the extreme. Think of privacy, so data collection, or artificial intelligence. How could this go into the wrong direction? And this is quite helpful to think about that. Also, dystopian literature lets us consider moral and ethical implications of technologies or developments we have today. Think of, for example, genetic engineering, where if that was taken to the extreme, if it was really developed quite well, quite functioning, what about cloning of humans and so forth? So what kind of moral problems could this create? So this is my little introduction to Utopia, Dystopia and literature. I hope it helped you a little bit. If you are preparing for the German Abitur, I have a number of other videos that might help you, so please check them out. Have a good day, see you soon, goodbye.
English with Mr. B.